All right, there we go. Recording is on. As usual, if you have any questions, please send them in the chat, private or public, doesn't matter to me. And I will do my best to answer them. I kind of got stumped on a question early on, but I should be good on Red Scare related questions. Time will tell. That being said, we're talking about the second Red Scare today. So reminder, what's going on in the background from after World War II in 1945 all the way through till the early 90s. Somebody in the chat tell me what's happening. What's going to be happening throughout this entire unit in the background. It's going to be affecting and influencing things. What event or what situation or what thing? Somebody in the chat tell me if you're not sure, take a guess. It might seem obvious because it kind of is. Not quite. Something that's going on throughout the entire unit. So it'll happen through Unit 8 and even into Unit 9. It'll still be happening because Unit 8 ends in 1980. So what's going on in the background? The Red Scare is a part of what's going on, as are plenty of other things like an arms race, a space race. What kind of war? There's going to be wars too, but all these wars have to do with a certain event. Yes, the Cold War, nailed it. So the Cold War. Cold War is going on in the background. Who are we fighting in the Cold War? Like who's the enemy? Who's the opponent of the United States in the Cold War? Soviet Union, the dirty Russians, right? I don't know why I called them dirty. That's kind of rude. Yeah, it's the US and the Soviet Union. They're the ones fighting. Stalin Soviets. Yes, so that's a really good connection, right? Because post-World War II, a big part of what escalates this stuff is Stalin. Kind of a jerk, right? Not the greatest guy. Liked to murder people, liked to lock them in prison. So Stalin's a big part of why this Cold War happens, but the US isn't free in it either. And this is a pretty obvious connection, but some of the other stuff we're going to talk about might not be. So one thing I do want to point out before we get into it, I was looking through yesterday's exit tickets, and actually Janessa pointed it out to me. So I wanted to say thank you, Janessa, because I hadn't noticed it when I made it. But when I made the exit ticket, I was trying to give you guys like a softball question in the beginning, that multiple choice question about like, you know, how are these related to the Cold War? And I threw in like, I don't remember what I put. I put like 9/11. I put Vietnam. I put some other stuff, right? And the answer was supposed to be Vietnam. But when I was making the question, you know, I was just thinking really fundamentally. And then when we were in class, if you guys remember, we talked about like bin Laden and the Mujahideen and how the CIA kind of trained bin Laden. And like, you can tie 9/11 sort of back to the Cold War. So I just want to let you know, if you thought that, if you put that, I'm not going to count it wrong. Like, you are right. That is a valid connection. Just know my intention behind that question was not to do that. So if you thought that and you're like, I got it wrong, that's a good connection. Just be careful if you're going to make it in an exam, because you got to have a whole lot of proof and a whole lot of really specific information. Does that make sense, guys? But just know that if you did have that, like, you know, we talked about this in class, don't think you were wrong. Don't feel bad. But the answer on that one should have been Vietnam. But again, that was just my fault. I made the question wrong. I should have made a more solid question with less like wiggle room. So that being said, let's move on. Let's get into the second Red Scare. So we're going to explain the causes and effects of the Red Scare after World War II. So we're going to talk about why it started. We're going to talk about the effects, mainly effects, because if we're going to guess, we're going to take some guesses, and I would like everybody to just kind of throw a guess in the chat. What probably caused the Red Scare after World War II? Take like 40 seconds. What probably caused the Red Scare? What were some things that probably led to Americans being like, red? What do we think? Last two superpowers in the world. Okay, that's good, right? They're only people they can face as each other. What else? What might make Americans nervous about the Soviets? There's about growing power of Russia, sure. Gaining lands, right? They took over all those Eastern Bloc countries, right? 20 more seconds, guys. What else do we got? Those are all really good answers. Communism spreading, yes. Yes, Americans hate communism and it scares them. And for some reason. Anything else? There's one more. What are they building up? What are they procuring or proliferation? There's a proliferation going on of something. Anybody remember the thing that both sides are building up and adding to? Nukes. Yes, everybody's building nukes. What was the Red Scars? Do you mean Red Scare? Hopefully you mean Red Scare. We're going to get into the Red Scare in a bit. Did I type something wrong? Did I spell something wrong? Yeah, so nuclear proliferation. Nuclear proliferation is the term for like building up your nuclear arsenal, right? It's a type of arms race. So proliferation. First key point and only key point. We have a few slides on this. I got a quick clip I want to show you, and then we got an exit ticket. It is a fairly short lesson. Tomorrow, guys, just quick reminder, I'm going to be out tomorrow, but we are going to have a primary source kind of breakdown assignment on Google Classroom. And I'll even upload a video to the YouTube, and I'll link to it with me kind of breaking down one of them. And then it'll be kind of like when we do like writing days, we're going to break down some primary sources. So it should be fun times. But if you have questions on that, just reach out to me on Teams and I'll help you out with that. So again, first key point, Americans will debate policies and methods designed to expose suspected communists within the United States, even as both parties, and this is like Democrats, Republicans, supported broader strategies of containing communism. So everybody wants to contain communism, wants to keep it outside of the US, but they have different methods of how they want to do that and different beliefs on how much they should do that. I'll give you a quick 2 minutes on here. Shouldn't take too long. And then we'll go ahead and move forward. A little bit more time. Again, make sure that you have the key points in. And again, if you have any questions, please reach out and let me know. And I will do my best to answer them. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. So, second Red Scare, base information, right? Stuff you should probably already know, but just in case we forgot, let's talk about it again. The second Red Scare took place after World War II, not the first one after World War I, right? Remember, there was a first Red Scare in 1917. These are two different Red Scares. That is how much America hates red. They had two Red Scares. This is how anti-communist America is. Now, the first Red Scare was a lot of like, are they a spy? Are they a spy? Are they a spy? Get them out of there, right? No communist parties, none of this, none of that, right? But the second one is a little bit different. It's a little more internal. People are a little more on edge about it. People are really scared of spies. There's going to be trials. There's going to be people blacklisted. There's going to be executions. There's going to be a lot of snitching. There's going to be a senator that claims that crazy stuff and then kind of gets in trouble for it. It's going to be an interesting Red Scare. Red is, of course, for Soviet communism, that special breed of communism. And while the U.S. is fighting to contain communism around the world through the Truman Doctrine or Marshall Plan, the U.S. also needs to contain communism at home. Yeah, the little tombstones are cool, right? China, Hungary, Poland, like the red iceberg. There's really cool propaganda during the Red Scare that's like, it's cool, it's interesting, at the same time, it's almost a little funny at how like terrifying. I mean, communism's horrible, right? But the idea that it would be so, it's villainized and it's almost personified. Yeah, the Titanic. It kind of looks like he's on the Titanic, right? That's true. Yeah, like in some of this propaganda stuff, like it's personified. Like I should have made a propaganda slide. I didn't. But those of you guys that have been in my classroom, you've seen my Scott's paper towel lad. Let me see if I can find it. Actually, I'll just pull up the original one really quick, right? I have one of these in my room. And this is the actual one. This isn't the one in my room says classroom, but like this is a real Scott's paper towel ad from the 50s. And it's like this dude looks very upset and he's asking you if if you like communists because you don't use Scott paper towels. Like there's some nonsense in here. Fun times though. Anyways, let's get into, actually, let me leave you a minute and a half on this slide and then we'll move forward. About a minute on the clock. Again, the Red Menace is real. Sorry. I mean, who knows, right? It's hard to say. All I'll say about it is every time it's been used in the world, it's kind of crashed and burned, right? Like China's the only example, but they're not real communists. They're kind of totalitarian in nature. So but I mean, maybe it's hard to say, right? There's people who share your sentiment, Isaac, about communism, but yeah, I don't know. It would be hard to say. I would lean towards, but I'm old. That's what old dudes do. We hate communists, All right, so federal policies during the Red Scare. So unlike the first Red Scare, which is a little more, communists, spies. The second Red Scare is like that too, but way worse. And there's actual repercussions in policy, right? So Wow, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. That was weird. Anyways, so President Truman will pass an executive order that is known as the Federal Employee Loyalty and Security Program. And basically, federal employees had to swear they were not a communist or a fascist, and they had to swear their loyalty to the United States, right? I love the USA. I love democracy. I'm not a communist. I'm not a fascist. I promise. They had to do those things in order to get government jobs. This also allowed for methods of investigation into kind of like a cult. Yes, that's a really good analogy. This also allowed for methods of investigation into their background, basically meaning that for the first time, the federal government had legal means to investigate their own workers to kind of see what they were up to, see if they were only pretending to be in the cult, but then really they were, in that other cult behind our back, stuff like that. The next act, the Taft-Hartley Act, of 1947 was a response to massive waves of labor union strikes. And this act, what it did is it made it harder for unions to strike, and for union leaders had to pledge that they weren't members of the Communist Party at the same time. So so things to keep in mind, right? There's now actual policy being designed, put into place, implemented, and used that make it harder for labor unions to be labor unions, as if the labor unions didn't have it hard enough. They make it harder to strike. They make the leaders pledge loyalty to the U.S. by saying they are not members of the Communist Party. And now federal employees have to pledge loyalty and swear that they are members of the Communist Party. Do you kind of see a thread here? Or a thread, a connection here? And what do you think is going to happen if, I don't know, let's say federal employee Fred and Bob hate each other, and Bob's finally had enough, and he says, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tell people that I know that Fred's a communist. Like, what is that doing for people? I don't know if people. Yeah, people are terrified of each other. It's weird. But so again, what acts like these kind of do? Like low key, what are they allowing? What are they? Maybe not straight up starting, but encouraging. What are people probably going to be encouraged to do? That's on sad demo. What are people like kind of encouraged to do now if they suspect? Yes, exactly. So they're expected to snitch. You're going to get a whole generation of people that are snitching on each other because they're communists, right? The only recent example I can think, imagine snitching for real though, right? And they're not going to get stitches. They're going to get rewarded by the government. Be like, good job. You found a potential communist, even though it's probably not true. Yes, I know, Isaac. They're going to snitch and not get stitches. They won't even be put in ditches. They're just going to be like, thanks for telling us a communist was in the neighborhood. It's horrible. It's a horrible time. I'm sorry. But basically, the only example I can think of like, because this used to be in like media a lot more in like older TV shows, but they do it in, I don't know if you guys watch WandaVision. I saw like some of it, but I haven't finished it, so no spoilers. But it's at some point where it's still in the first episode, I think, right? Where he goes, oh, Fred is a communist. And then everybody stops and looks at him and he's like, I'm kidding. Like that was kind of how it was. It's not that overt, not that pretend, but it was definitely like if you said your neighbor was a communist, people heard you and people were like, oh, not good, right? It'd be like, it's hard to compare to what it would be like today if you found out your neighbor was doing something, because it's a lot of like, it's weird. It's a weird situation and it's going to get worse. So I've been rambling a lot on this slide, but just so you guys have a little bit of time, I'm gonna give you a quick 30 seconds. But yeah, if you guys watched that show, they do it in that show and everybody stops and he says to be like, I'm kidding, sorry. I think that's what he says. Yes. Somebody would start listening into your neighbor a little bit more, most likely. Now, if you worked in a federal job, like let's say you worked at the post, let's say you were a post office, worked at the post office. That's kind of, yeah, they're kind of chismosas. Say you worked at the post office, Isaac, or you worked somewhere that was a federal building, and you said your coworker was a communist, then the government would literally be like, okay, let's intervene, right? If you say your neighbor's a communist, people in the neighborhood might judge them, might start listening to them a little more, might make sure, might not tell them stuff like, oh, might uninvite them to the barbecue, right? But if you worked in a federal job and it happened, the government now had a means to investigate if you were actually a communist or not, which, not great. Okay, 30 seconds is up. Let's move forward. So what are some effects? There's literally going to be communist hunting. It's going to be like find the communists in the country, right? So the House Un-American Activities Committee, or the HUAC in the House of Representatives, began searching for communist influence throughout all of American society, especially in Hollywood. The barbecue view, I heard you like sharing, it's true though. But again, this HUAC, or the House Un-American Activities Committee, searched for communists throughout all of society, especially in Hollywood. The film industry was a great place for communists to spread their communist message: bad, evil. And in 1947, 10 Hollywood directors. I do not know the names, guys. I don't think they're really like as far as I know, they're not that relevant other than just being, getting in trouble for being communists. Were singled out as communists and summoned to testify against Congress. They refused to do so. So they were held in contempt of Congress, and they had to serve short prison sentences. They were also put on a Hollywood blacklist, and they never worked again. Yes, the "oh my God" anyways meme is it's a really good one to explain a lot of this stuff. I should have made one actually, now that I think about it. But yeah, oh my God, Hollywood directors. Anyways, but the Hollywood 10, as they were known, were singled out for being communist. They were summoned. They did not go. They got put in prison, and then they were put on a blacklist where they couldn't work in Hollywood anymore. Let's give you a quick 2 minutes on here. And again, it was the job of the House Un-American Activities Committee to root out potential communist influence in their society. And when I say their society, I of course mean American society. Well, no. So one thing I will say, just because these guys were actually communists, whether or not that means they should have been, lost their jobs or gone to prison or something else, but some of these people are actually communists. They're not just suspected of being communists. So I believe my understanding is that the Hollywood 10 were communists, but they were just they weren't like spies or anything. They were just communists. They were just Hollywood directors who liked communism. But in America in the 1940s and 50s, and for the most part, even now to an extent, you can't really like communism. You can talk about it now more, right? And technically no one's going to do anything about it. But if you're a politician and you mention communism, unless you're saying you're going to destroy it, it's a bad word to politicians. Kind of likes it. Yeah, I mean, there's people out there that kind of if you think full-on communism's a good idea, you should probably research it more. But if you like aspects of it, who doesn't? They have, everybody's got cool ideas, but it's just a matter of whether or not they can be influenced in the right way, like you were saying earlier. So it's hard to say. About 20 seconds left. Yeah, I mean, some ideas are always good. Yeah. Some concepts anyways. I don't think, like I said, it's never been put into place correctly. But, I don't know. I'm a capitalist. What do I know? All right, let's go ahead and move forward. All right, here we go. McCarthyism. So Joseph McCarthy, senator, gave a speech where he claimed 205 names. He had 205 names of people that were infiltrating the State Department that were known communists. To put that into perspective, the State Department is where all of the foreign policy stuff is handled, right? This is a big deal. And him telling everybody publicly, he have 205 names of people that are actual communists, freaked everybody out. It blew their minds. They were like, what? The State Department is full of communists? Well, the whole country must be full of communists. People literally thought the country was full of communism. The real number, he later said, was only 57, but by the time he said that, by the time he found that out, the damage is already done. What? Anyways, damage is already done by the time he said it, though. And Joseph McCarthy single-handedly made the Red Scare way worse than it would have been, because he had people thinking that communists were everywhere. That idea of snitch on your neighbor and do all this, and oh, your neighbor at the barbecue really, really wanted to share a little more than normal. He's probably a communist, right? Like, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but only a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, don't buy these paper towels. They breed Bolsheviks. Like, and a lot of that stuff happens because of McCarthy and his speech and his claims. He later fell under pressure to prove these claims, right? You know, there's trials and stuff, and he failed to do so because, again, he only found 57 names. And as quickly as he got famous as like America's top communist hunter, he very quickly fell out of favor and fame because he couldn't prove anything he said, and he kind of just said a bunch of nonsense. But he's a pretty important figure because he made the Red Scare. If the Red Scare was a small fire, he poured a whole bunch of gasoline on it and made it 5-10 times worse than it would have been. So the McCarthy trials you can make a comparison to the witch trials. I wouldn't, just because they're so long ago. Like they're in period one, and period one we don't talk a lot about here. But the comparison you can make is like, it's a trial where in a lot of cases judgment's already been made, or like they're unfair trials, and it's kind of like, oh, is this person a witch? Is this person a communist? That person a communist? In that sense, they're similar. I would just be careful if you're going to make that in an essay. You can kind of make it, but I'd be careful. Yeah, let me get some water. Oh, that's gasoline. That's true. Oh no, gasoline. That's basically his thing. Again, makes the Red Scare much worse. Not that it wasn't already kind of crazy, but he makes it way worse. About 20 seconds, and then we'll move on. All right, let's go ahead and move forward. So, last slide for today. We got a little bit more to cover, but this is the last slide on the list. Let's talk about the Rosenberg trials. So, Rosenbergs are a lovely Jewish couple in the United States, right, in the 1940s. And on August 29th, 1949, the Soviets developed their atomic bomb. Tested it, proved that it worked. Hallelujah, Soviets got a bomb now, right? Not good. But many Americans thought, correctly so, that there was no way the Soviets could make an atomic bomb without stealing the American plants. So throughout their investigations and looking for it, a couple, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg, were accused of being involved in stealing nuclear plants. They were both active members of the Communist Party, and they were both executed in an electric chair. Subsequent research, post-research, has shown that at the very least, Julius was a Soviet spy, but we don't quite know if they stole the atomic plans. We know at the very least the husband was a spy, but they were both executed in an electric chair for spycraft. Maybe, yeah, in features a little bit. Yeah, I'd give you that. Devin, I think they do. I know that they put like some, like the head isn't, it's not like a dome, it's like a cloth, like you can see it on there, it's kind of like a clothy thing. I think so. I'm sure they did, but I have no idea if they got a last name. That's a good question. All right, a little bit more time, about 30 seconds. A little bit more time. Perfect. Okay. So let's talk about what we are doing next. What times it is? 8:40. So here's what we're going to do, guys. Because I want to make sure you have enough time to actually do the exit ticket, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you what the video is. And if you want to watch it to help out with your response, feel free. But just so that way everybody has the same amount of time, I'm going to not show it to the class because we're a little low on time. And I want to give you time to respond instead. So on Google Classroom, you will see your exit ticket here. So second red scare, or the red scare. And it's only one question. Basically, what I want you to do is write a thesis on the following prompt and then provide 3 pieces of evidence. In the chat, how many pieces of evidence do I want you to use to support your thesis? And again, all you need to do is provide them. 3, right? You just got to list them. So if your thesis is, and I just don't use this is a bad thesis, right? But I don't know, communism is the worst, period. That's your thesis. 3 pieces of evidence why. You just got to list them. You don't need to give me a whole LEQ. This isn't a whole LEQ, right? Give me a thesis, give me 3 pieces of evidence. The prompt is, how did the Red Scare alter society in the United States post-World War II? Again, give me a thesis, 3 pieces of evidence. A thesis and 3 pieces of evidence. That being said, one thing you can do, right, if you want, you don't have to, is on YouTube, the American Experience from PBS, really good documentary series, has a McCarthyism clip about the just investigation. It's really good background. I would say 3 to 4 sentences, because don't just give me evidence, give me a sentence for each piece of evidence, and then give me a solid thesis, a solid argument, right? So 3 to 4, potentially 5 sentences. It shouldn't be more than 5 or 6 sentences. But I don't like to give sentence count. So if you can make it work in more or less, that's up to you. Don't write too much, though. Any questions about the assignment? The exit ticket, I should say. It's not it's not an in-class assignment. It's like an exit ticket. Any questions? Then take this time, use it. Stay on this call for about 10 minutes or so. I want to give you to make sure that you can use this time effectively.